We we cannot use the techniques of the 1960s and 70s to be able to connect with, for example, the Gen Zs, and we have to meet them where they're at. We have a generation that's learning faster, is very knowledgeable, and and we have to recognize that that's not going away. So how we value, communicate, and connect with them determines how successful we are.
Work often gets messy very fast when communication breaks down. Leaders don't fail because they're necessarily evil or incompetent or even intentional. They fail because they think they've been clear, that everyone else heard what they wanted, what they intended, but typically everyone else heard something completely differently. Today's guest has built a career standing in that gap between what leaders say and what their employees hear. Amos Balongo is a keynote speaker and executive communication coach who's worked with leaders across dozens of countries. His work isn't hype, slogans, or, big to-dos in convention centers. It's truly about helping people in positions of authority understand how their words will land when the stakes are high. This conversation isn't going to be all about Amos being inspiring for us today, which I know he will be anyway. It's about how do we understand each other and what happens when leaders confuse sounding inspiring with being understood. Amos, welcome to Work But Make It Human. How are you doing today?
Jim, it's great to be here, and thank you for those kind words and introduction. Excited to have a good conversation with you today.
I am too, man. I think we're going to have a blast. I think we're going to really dig into some deep issues here. Amos, one of the things that I like to ask as an icebreaker is a kind of a fun question. What's the most absurd workplace policy you have ever seen in all of your travels and all the different countries you've worked in? What's the most absurd workplace policy you've seen?
Wow, you got me thinking there, Jim. I would say I think one of the most absurd workplace policies I've ever seen has to be this particular country that I was visiting, and I was visiting this people actually had to leave all their cell phones outside, and also had to remove their shoes and wear specific shoes to go into this factory. It was a knitting factory, so I didn't understand the cell phones and the shoe thing, but of course I was a guest. I didn't ask many questions, but just observe and learn.
That is pretty wild. That is very absurd. I've been in shops and factories that don't allow cell phones, and it always blows my mind that in 2026 we're still going down that rabbit hole. Did you ask a question about why they had those policies in place?
Well, I asked the cell phone question, and that was because of proprietary reasons. They didn't want employees recording, and that was that. But the shoe question was really not answered.
Interesting.
And it wasn't. What was interesting, Jim, is it wasn't like there was safety boots or anything. Everybody had there were regular shoes, so you came in with your shoes, and then you switched out with the work shoes, and there was no difference between the shoes. So
interesting.
So my guess is as wild as yours.
And this was a knitting factory?
Yes.
So anybody out there who is in the knitting factory business and you have an answer for Amos, please send me a message, send to Amos a message. Let us know what the heck is going on with the no shoes. All right. Yeah. So that was fun. Thank you, Amos. That is absurd. You've worked your journey, your story is amazing. You've been all over. You grew up in Africa. You've worked across cultures and continents in your job and doing what you do. When Was there a moment that you realized that communication was more about power than it was about actual language?
Yes, Jim. I remember in order to sometimes lead people well or coach people or guide people, you have to have been in a bad experience, in a bad leadership experience. And I remember earlier on in my career where I had this really amazing leader who really was a wonderful person, had really great ideas, but could not get them through the finish line. And actually, to make matters worse, this particular leader got things across the finish line. And by the time they were getting down to where they need to be applied, it was completely opposite of what his initial thoughts or ideas were, and in fact it had a kind of like a backfiring kind of effect. And that's when I began the journey of looking and seeing, number one, people need to, you know be led well, but you know looking at some of the greatest leaders in this world have been the greatest communicators, because you take your message and you get it across, and it works both positively and negatively as well. You know, there's some bad actors out there that have been very good at getting their messages out and getting people to do things, and you're like, my goodness, how do they even succeed in doing this? And it comes down to the ability to effectively communicate and connect and get the people they're leading to take action.
I like it. I
Yeah.
like it. So when a leader hires you, what what is the impetus? What is the problem that they are seeing within their organization that leads them to call you?
Well, most of the time, about 90% of the time, it's, well, I'm communicating, but I don't know why my, you know, communication is not being effective. That is like 90% of the time. Or I'm not being heard, or people are not listening to what I have to say, which is, you know, and that can go into a whole different what you call we can go in so many ways in that. It could be generational, it could be cultural, but at the end of the day, it's, hey, I'm communicating, but nobody's listening. And a lot of times, Jim, it's everybody can communicate. I mean, you can communicate, I can communicate. I sent out a memo at the end of the year about our 2026 you know goals and objectives. I communicated. So many people think, oh, I emailed or I sent a memo out, I've communicated. No, that's just the beginning of it. And you have to be able to follow that up to the point whereby it's actionable and the people will actually understand it. So that's what I get a lot is, hey, no one's listening, I'm communicating, it's not effective, what's going on?
Yeah. Um and then once you're there, what do you uncover that shows them that the reason they called you may not be the root cause of the issue?
There's always there's a few factors, but I'll give you kind of the top two that I typically see. The first is complexity in how a leader communicates. So you want to make sure that you're putting yourself in not just your executive shoes or the people you're leading who are reporting into you, but the people they're leading, the people who are leading those people, and down to and I'll use a factory example, down to the person working the lines. And a lot of communication is complex. It's understood in the boardroom, but when you get out of the boardroom, nobody gets it. Too complex. And the power of simplicity is that it leads people towards action. A lot of times as leaders and managers and directors, we want to impress with the complexity. This I often hear, well, this guy or this girl, they know their stuff. Yeah, they know their stuff, but they're the only ones who know that stuff. And for me, I say, yeah, we want to take it simplified so that that person on the front line is able to apply it. Because are you do you want to impress with complexity, or do you want to mobilize with simplicity?
Um, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. Uh, are there things that executives tell themselves about the way that they communicate that is just not factually true?
Yes, it's it's an assumption that my team gets it. They get what I'm trying to say. It's and I call that assumed communication, where I just assume you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
Yeah,
got it. So let's talk a little bit more about you, Amos. You moved from Africa, Kenya, if I remember correctly,
that's
right?
correct. Yeah.
To the US, and you've built a very successful career speaking to leaders. Um, what lessons did you learn in that journey, immigrating into the US, about being heard versus being listened to?
Well, Jim, if you asked me when I first came to the US if I would be, speaking to leaders and others and having people listen, but also be having people pay me to do it, I would have laughed you out of the room.
I love that.
Yeah, because there's a difference between being a talker and being a communicator. Now I've always been a talker all my life, and I had to quickly learn that talking doesn't get you anywhere. It's communicating and connecting with people and speaking to their hearts that gets you there. And for me, I would say success is a daily thing. We're every day constantly working to get better. The lessons I have learned in this journey have been about humility. It's a first one is, and for me, it's you're constantly learning. You're never better than anyone else. You're just trying to learn. When people open up their organizations and say we want you to come in and we want you to help us out, I don't come in with a magic wand saying I know everything. I come in with a learning set of eyes and ears. I want to learn so that I can be able to get you as a team to resolve the challenges, because the solutions are always in the team. You can't expect me to walk into a engineering company today and be able to figure out exactly what the problem is, but I can ask the right questions that unlock the answers.
Got it.
Some of the greatest leaders I've met are the most humble people. And that has also taught me about teachability. You have to be teachable.
Mm.
Jim, how many people I made who tell me, well, I know everything there is to know about leadership.
I bet it's more than I wish it was.
And I'm like, goodness, you have just exposed your blind spot, because I don't know everything there is to know about leadership and communication. As a matter of fact, I am a leadership and communication coach, but I have three coaches. I have a speaking coach, a communication coach, and a leadership coach.
I love that.
And I always tell people, do not hire a coach or a speaker or communicator who is not being coached, because where are they leading you?
Yeah.
Yeah. We have to be pouring into our cups so that we can actually pour into others' cups.
I'm sorry for my pause there. You asked me a very pointed question. My brain was in overdrive because I've never thought of it that way, Amos, where why would you hire a coach that isn't being coached themselves?
Yeah. Because that means that's a person who knows everything there is to know about leadership.
Whew. That's a good knowledge drop there, Amos. I think that's worth the price of admission right there, man. I like it.
Thank you, Jim.
Wow. All right. So, uh, we've talked about, well, can we call it overconfidence in
Absolutely.
feeling like that you know about everything? What about insecurity? How does insecurity show up in executive communication?
So I would say, if we're using the rules of a jungle, for example, the animals that are the most scared, that are not confident, are the ones that end up being prey. And in the executive world, I look at it like, if most people are not confident, it's because either they are not comfortable in their own skin, they have not invested enough time to understand leadership. And sadly, I see that a lot, where leaders are not confident, and as a result, they become ineffective. Because your team and the folks you're leading, they can sniff that out from the 18th hole, if I will. And on the flip side, Jim, there's some people that are absolutely confident and they have no idea what they're doing. And they
So,
lead people the wrong way.
how do you balance those two? How do you balance the confident without being overly confident?
So you have to, I want to take this back to authenticity. When you're leading people, you need to be authentic. And for me, it means you need to at least have an idea where you're going. I can't be taking people somewhere where I don't know. And anybody who is leading you somewhere and they have no idea where they're going, I have to question a lot of things about it. And for me, it's understanding where you're taking people, how you're going to get them there, and understanding the journey and what it takes to get to the destination. And that comes from just growth. One of the things I ask leaders when I meet them is, how are you growing today? What are you reading? How are you pouring into your cup? Because that tells me you're growing, and that tells me that as long as you're growing, Jim, you're going to lead people well. Now, growth has to be growth within leadership. I'm growing in other areas where I'm perfecting my golf game. It's not about that. It's about how are you growing in terms of leading people. So that's what builds the confidence. And then you have to be aware of your own influence. Because again, overconfidence shows up as somebody who's disconnected from people, aloof, whatever you want to call it. So you have to be able to be humble enough, teachable enough to understand that this is where this is where the balance is.
Yeah. I get that. You talk a lot about intentional leadership in your Amos Balongo sites, LinkedIn, all of that kind of fun stuff. And I'm sure you get asked what intentional leadership looks like. But let's talk about the flip side. What does unintentional leadership look like?
So unintentional leadership, and in the interest of simplifying this, because we've talked about simplifying communication, unintentional leadership is you've got some great ideas, but you never get around to them. You always hear, I'm going to get around to it. If you get around to it, you never get around to it. So it's turning your someday I'm going to do something. Someday I'm going to get this done. To Tuesday, I'm going to get this done. So how do you turn your some days to Tuesdays, to Mondays? Because otherwise you're out there talking stories, but nothing is getting done.
Yeah, I get that. Have you seen executive communication change a lot in your time as a coach and consultant in this space?
Yes, Jim, absolutely. And how I see this changing, and really over the last 5 years, has been a lot to do with a generational change, where you know, you've got the younger generation coming into the workplace, and the way they communicate, the more they communicate in, is very different. So you've got these executives who have to change the way they communicate if they have to reach the the younger folks who are just getting into the organizations. And for me, I look at it this way: we cannot use the techniques of the 1960s and 70s to be able to connect with, for example, the Gen Zs, and we have to meet them where they're at. And I see that as one of the things that I get called in to do a lot is the generational communication, if I will. Well, everybody else in my organization seems to get it except this group of people. Now, for me, it's are you valuing them? Because at the end of the day, Jim, we now have more computing power on our phones than the computing power that sent the Apollo mission to the moon. So
Isn't that
this,
wild?
yeah, imagine, when you think about it that way. And so we have a generation that's learning faster, is very knowledgeable, and and we have to recognize that that's not going away. So how we value, communicate, and connect with them determines how successful we are. Otherwise, you have a gap where you've got, you know, a certain group of people that get it and the other group that just doesn't.
Yeah, got it. Um, I'm gonna ask you to be a little vulnerable here, Amos.
Yep.
Was there a moment in your career where the words that you said landed differently than you intended?
Oh boy. The question would be how many times if I was to
I like it. I like it.
if I was to I mean, I'll write a book about that without doing any research.
I like that. That's a good line.
And the thing is, Jim, I mean, as communicators, you're always, you always can land 100%. There's gonna be times that you hit the 90%, and it's part of communication. You know,
Yeah.
um, uh, I always say that sometimes when I first started as a communicator, if I was a pilot, I'd probably be in prison. Plane landed in another country. It was supposed to go to Phoenix. We ended up in Japan. So 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 yes, I've had a lot of those moments. And for me, I would say the moments where my messages have not landed have been in a lot of foreign countries where I'm speaking and people misconstrue, what I'm saying. And I've gotten very careful about learning the cultures, the places that I go, and the things that I need to say and how to say them so that people can understand them, so that you're not offending people.
Yeah.
And I've been in situations where I've said things that we would typically say in America that would offend people in other countries. So a lot of it is more of being aware of who you're communicating with, the cultural environment, and how your message is going to be received.
And so you talked about that in terms of countries. What about industries here in the US? Are there different cultural norms in ways of communication or intentional communication works best within the US between industries? Or is it kind of something that you could go from manufacturing into banking and those cultural norms remain the same?
Well, Jim, that's a really good question because the culture of every organization is different. It could be two banking industries, two engineering or manufacturing industries doing the same thing, but the culture is different. And you have to be able to understand that. And one of the things that I do when I'm asked to speak at an event or to coach a team of executives, I learn the culture. I understand what is a culture. Every organization has a communication culture, whether they have a communication plan or not. So what am I walking into? What is a culture? There is no one size fits all when it comes to that. And once you understand it, you can navigate it. Even if the culture needs to shift and the culture needs to change, you need to understand what that existing culture is. And that's what I love about what I do, is that every day is different. Every day I'm dealing with a different industry, different culture. I just got back from Australia and I was speaking to a group of people. They are completely different culture. And next month I'll speak to an industry exactly the same as the folks in Australia, but exactly the same industry, but completely different culture.
Got it. Got it. That's wild. So this is a question I usually ask on my other show, the Manufacturing Culture Podcast. Amos, what does culture mean to you?
Culture to me means that we operate within a certain framework. And culture to me means we're constantly, these are the set of, I'd say, norms that we work with as a team, or that we exist by as a team. However, we need to make sure that our culture does not eat our vision or our growth for lunch. And by that I mean, you go into places and people say, this is how we always do it. This is how we've always done it. However, the culture should be able to shift to allow you to say, well, this is how we've always done it, but is this the right way to do it going forward? Is there anything that we're missing? So culture has to be fluid. And if it's set, then you're basically, you know, stuck in the 70s, in the 60s, in the 80s because of your culture.
Yeah, absolutely. I used to, when coaching and consulting was more of what I did other than this, I started my company as a cultural consultant. And what I realized very quickly is culture is very individualistic. It's because culture at its most base is going to be determined by the alignment of values, those norms that you're talking about, right? And if you're acting on them in a certain way, then even is that I may not have, but you have, you would find that to be a good culture. I wouldn't, right? Just because we value different things. Our norms are different. We act differently on those norms. So I love the way that you put that, man. It very, very good definition of what culture is. Amos, we're gonna jump into a little bit more of a case study here, something I found on the workplace Reddit sub. So summary of this is there's a mid-sized company that holds a mandatory all hands meeting amidst layoff rumors. So there's rumors going around that there's going to be layoffs. The CEO delivers a speech about resilience and gratitude and everybody needing to stay positive. At the same time, he announces that this year there were going to be no raises. Benefits were going to cost more out of paychecks. There's going to be increased expectations and something about a vague restructuring of the organizations. There was no specific details. There was no Q&A that went along with this. He closed by saying leadership means staying positive and expects everyone to bring their best attitude tomorrow. Managers had no answers. Top performers started updating their resumes. At the same time, leadership is confused by the backlash and insists that the CEO's message was super inspiring. I selected this one because of what you do. I think this fits you very, very well. What do you think? Is this a good case for us to talk about?
I love it. Let's go.
All
I
right.
love that.
So, to you, where do you think that this leader confused inspiration with avoidance or just skirting the issue in general?
First, I want to go back to a leadership fundamental, and that is a leader needs to see things coming before others do. And that's why you're a leader. You're supposed to see before others, and that means that's why you're ahead and you're thinking ahead of others. So I believe that this did not land on this leader's lap, a week ago or 2 weeks ago. They knew this was coming.
Yep.
Now, how you prepare your team towards that is where I see the shortcoming here, because you're going to know at the end of Q1, you're going to have an idea how Q2 and quarter 3 is going to look like. And as a result, you need to begin preparing your team in your messaging, because this is a situation of shocking a system, if I will. And I think I would have handled that differently, where you begin communicating about these are some of the challenges we're looking at. What do we need to do in Q1 to adjust the sales? Having those conversations. When people begin to see that at Q1, at the end of the fourth quarter, if these changes are being made, it's not a surprise. So this is a leadership more than even a communication issue.
Yeah, I get
Because
that.
leaders, what blindsides you is what destroys your organization.
Wow. So what if you were in attendance, if you were a fly on the wall, or even doing what you do, and you're a coach, you're a consultant, this is a company you're close with, and so you decide to come sit in on this message, what would you have heard from that case? Or maybe more importantly, what would you pull this leader, the CEO, aside and tell him after that message?
First and foremost, if this was one of my clients, would not get to that point. Would not.
Fair, very fair.
This communication would have been handled very differently. So I would be sitting in that room under different circumstances. I wouldn't be blindsided the way everybody else was.
Sure.
But to answer your question, there's some sensitivity there that was missed. There is, we're dealing with people's livelihoods, people's daily bread. You have to humanize this, and it looks like that's not what happened. Because at the end of the day, there's a human in that. If you scratch hard enough, you find a human in all of us. There's people thinking, how am I going to feed my family tomorrow? And so everybody deserves to be led well. And being led well means the leader has to really be sensitive to this and try not to get to that point, by seeing ahead. Now, if I was a fly in the wall in that room, now to answer your question in a very simple way, I'd pull this leader aside and ask them, who's your leadership and communications coach? Because you need to ask for your money back.
I love it. And see, that's the confidence that you trying to get people to work. I mean, when I hear stories like this, and I mean, we saw a lot of this in this last year in 2025. There was a lot of these kinds of conversations and a lot of people losing their livelihood. You brought up something that I wanted to zero in on, and that's understanding that human side, the empathy. How can leaders who are faced with having to give these kinds of addresses in front of their teams, how can they sound more empathetic, right? How can they be authentic? How can they sound more vulnerable and empathetic in a really tough situation?
Yes, though, in this particular situation, the empathy and the vulnerability and will come from how people were led. This CEO, this head of his organization, if they had been adjusting the sales, working with the teams, trying to avoid this shipwreck, if I will, that's where the authenticity comes from. It's very difficult to shock people with news like this and expect them to think you're empathetic. You sound very distant from it. But if through the year those conversations had been had and action was being taken to say, okay, we're our sales are low for Q2. We need to do this and this to bring it up, and those conversations are being had and people are trying, the leader is engaging and the leader is concerned about the direction of the company. By the time it gets to the point where this news is being broken, people empathize and they genuinely feel that, our leadership did the best they could to try and resolve this issue. And in that case, you have people who are even more supportive of this situation, because then the next question the leader will ask is, what can I do to support you through this transition? But you can't ask that question if you haven't led well.
Yeah. So do you think that situations like the case we just talked about, this post on Reddit, do you think that that leader accidentally, I guess, trained people to not trust them?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because when you drop something like that to people, I mean, how do you expect me to be motivated and engaged and bring my best game forward when everything is falling apart?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm hearing about this for the first time, you know? So, Jim, when you see something coming, it's very different than when you don't see it coming. You
Absolutely.
want these employees, this team to be like, yeah, we saw this coming. And most of the time when you're in a situation where people say we saw this coming, the reception is always different than, man, this came out of nowhere. Why didn't our leadership let us know that we were, in a bad place? Why didn't they give us an opportunity to rectify this? So, yeah.
Okay. I like it. Amos, let's go back to you and your framework. So, when a company hires you or an executive hires you because he is not feeling heard, or they are not feeling heard, I guess I should say, what's the first thing that you do walking in the door?
Well, first thing that I do is have a conversation with them, and normally very unstructured. Let's talk about why you think you might not be being heard well. Because a lot of times the solution is with the people within the team, and understanding the reasons and maybe other external factors then helps me shape a plan on how they can get to the next level. Because by that time, I know about the company, I've done my research, I'm not asking them what do you produce or manufacture. I already know that. I want to understand why this is happening. And then I'm able to peg it into, is it a complexity issue? Is it an authenticity issue? Is it a cultural issue? And sometimes it could be a transitional issue with a new CEO coming in and hasn't taken the time to really listen and learn and is trying to make those changes or trying to communicate. Once I understand, then I'm able to put in a framework and lead them within that framework. Same applies with speaking. When I'm invited to speak for organizations, I sit down with the leaders and ask them, what do you want to achieve? What are some of the pain points and challenges that you're having in your organization? What are the successes? Because we also build on the successes. For the most part, Jim, any organization, they're doing 80% of what they're doing right, but it's the 20% that's dragging them down.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. I like it. So what can any of the listeners today, they call Amos, they hire you. What is a realistic outcome that they can expect from working with you?
So I would say I'm in the manufacturing business, and I'll be able to manufacture them to be better leaders than they were, but more effective communicators who connect with the people they're leading and serve them well.
I love it. I love it. Amos, last question. Well, second to last question. What's one leadership principle that you wished leaders lived by without having to be prodded or poked to live that way?
It's you need to be growing every day. And by that, I mean, you need to be filling your leadership cup, your communication cup every day. Because as a leader, you are getting drained every single day. You're giving, you're pouring out of that cup. And if you're not filling that cup, it's running on empty.
Yeah.
I always say this: if you're green, you grow. If you're ripe, you rot.
Okay. I like it.
Gotta stay green.
Stay green. And
Yeah.
that could be the name of this episode. Before I ask you for your contact information, what's one thing that I haven't asked you that you want to share with the audience?
Well, we went through all these great questions and you did not ask me about my favorite food. So
Okay, let's hear it. What's your favorite food, Amos?
You will not believe this, Jim, but it's coconut water and seaweed.
Living in Hawaii, I buy that out of you, man. Coconut water and seaweed sounds absolutely not my cup of tea, but I'm very happy for you. Amos, where can people find you?
Visit my website, amosbalongo.com. Through this, you can download my communication checklist for free, which is just a checklist on how you can lead effectively. And this applies to people who are in leadership positions and people who are not. And through amosbalongo.com, you can link to my podcast, Journeys of Inspiration, which is really focused on getting you to learn through the journey and not focus so much on the destination. So, yeah, check me out and download some of my free resources.
Please, everybody, check him out. If you're in Hawaii, he'll show you around. If you have an event, hire him to come speak at it. And if you've got a company and you're not feeling like you're being heard, hire him to come help you understand. Amos, this has been an awesome show. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Jim. It's a pleasure.
Everybody, this has been Work But Make It Human. I hope that you make work a little bit more human. Have a great day.